Aloha, listeners and viewers. Welcome to Intermission, a conversation series between artists. Intermission is the Hawaii Chamber Music Festival's exclusive online channel with Broadcast Hawaii. I'm your host, Chris Yick, the founder of the festival, and today we have special guest, Mr. Kurt Muroki, with us. And for those of you who don't know, Kurt is actually, I guess, another very connected person with me. He's a dear mentor of mine, and he's also from Hawaii. So, aloha, Kurt.
Shaka.
How's it going?
Great. How are you doing, Chris?
Not too bad, not too bad. I guess right now everything is shut down with COVID-19 happened, and how has that affected your career, your work right now?
Well, it's whenever there's something tragic that happens, we have to adjust, and that's the most important thing. Life is never just a straight line.
Definitely.
As we all know, things happen. It reminds me a lot of 9/11, when that happened in New York City and everything got shut down.
For sure.
The difference with this is that computers have taken off. I guess it's a whole new and so, being very innovative online and with teaching online is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's really pushing us to a new digital age.
Yeah.
With all the negatives, there are always positives, and that's something to always remember and to look for in life and in music.
Yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are. For me, it's just like I've seen this. Some people have, taken this situation as a half glass, empty, whereas I think in some ways it's a half glass full because, it's like music, that this technology, for example, like how we're doing Zoom right now, or teaching over Zoom, or even just teaching over Skype and whatnot. It's nothing new per se, but it's something I would say like our profession hasn't really used a lot because we were very, traditional with the concert halls and in-person lessons. Do you think this is in some ways a way for musicians to finally adapt to this technology, or just sort of expand their horizon and how they make their music more accessible? Like how has technology helped you during this time?
Well, not to make light of the situation at all, what it is that we're basically being forced to.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's kind of like eating spinach when you're young. Gotta eat your lima beans and take your whatever, It's
For sure.
It's kind of like that. So you start expanding your horizons. Few ways that I think it's interesting is I've actually had more contact with people around the world now than I've had in the last 10 years.
Oh, awesome.
So we did a program, it wasn't a program per se, but it was an online lesson / master class with a bunch of European bass players. Tom Martin, a bunch of people in Italy. And so I got to hear students from around the world, and I was able to hear what teachers from around the world got to say.
That's awesome.
I think it's just interesting. You think you're in your own little world, teaching in Indiana. All of a sudden, you're realizing, well, no, we are saying the same things. We're on the same page. It is a language.
Absolutely.
And so it gives you a sense of community that way too. And I think the idea of community can be good and bad. So video, online, great. When it's hard to express emotion and feelings and through text, but online video, great.
Awesome.
What are the difficulties as a teacher? Say, for example, a student's having a problem with a passage. So as a teacher, I can't, jump into their room and say, okay, this is how you do it. This is your arm has to do this.
For sure.
You can't do that as a teacher. So it forces you to be very choosy with your words.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think being very careful with what you say and using the right word at the right time is crucial.
Would you say this has helped you become an even sort of more well-rounded, even better teacher during this kind of time? Or is it just the same principles that you're trying to apply?
makes me realize what I'm bad at. No, being a teacher is humbling. It's about, it's realizing how little you know. That's what a teacher should constantly be focused on, is how little you actually do know in the big scheme of things. It's very humbling. What it points out to me is exploring different ways of doing online video, live lessons versus recorded. The student records and sends me videos. When they record and send me videos, I can replay things over and over, and I can be really detailed. This note, a little flat.
You can make the playback speed like 1.5 times to see what notes are out of tune.
Exactly. What is that note? I can't tell. Where's that rhythm? Is that note has no direction to it. So being more detail oriented is a bonus. The bonus to having online video is you can have the student adjust their camera to specific angles. So for me, I have ADD. Okay. So I'm going to be honest about that. I have ADD. So when I'm looking at a video screen, I can be really focused. So I can see the entire student in that big of a space. So it's much easier to see what's going on as a whole. So those are the things that I find useful.
So let's actually shift gears into teaching. So pre-COVID, for those of you who don't know, Mr. Kurt Muroki is the professor of music at the very prestigious Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University Bloomington. Let's talk about your history there. I mean, when did you realize you wanted to become a teacher?
Well, okay, so I'm going to speak about a mentor of mine from Maui, Lance Joe, who I loved a lot. He was my favorite person, I tell you. He taught at Indiana University. I mean, he went to school at Indiana University, and he always talked about Indiana. Okay, I really think that, like, he really was such a wonderful teacher, and I kind of really started wanting to teach back then.
Okay.
But also, I started experimenting when I was at Juilliard with teaching, because I started realizing some of the students were like asking me for advice and guidance, and I didn't have the answers. So it just was really a lot of fun to figure all that stuff out. Yeah. And so I guess started to learn about teaching when I was in, an undergrad at Juilliard.
So how long have you been at Indiana now?
Oh gosh, 8 years now?
7 years.
7 years. 7 years.
And how many students do you have currently in your studio?
Currently 15.
Okay. Isn't that a lot? Like,
yeah.
So in your 7, 8 years, I mean, obviously you're a phenomenal performer, but I've also heard comments from teachers saying that, like, when they shift gears to sort of pedagogy, they find more fulfillment through, like, the students' progress or their performances. Do you have that sort of same inspiration? Like, do you feel just as inspired from your students more so than, big professional names per se? I mean, like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's a different animal, of course. When you're performing, it's all about the performance. It's all about you're on stage. This is how I feel about the music, but then I have to take a step back and make sure that the ensemble makes sense. When you're a teacher, you're diving into the music in a different way from all different angles, a big picture to details, and you're actually learning about the pieces you're playing, that you've been playing, and learning. You become a student when you become a teacher, and again, what does that do to my own playing? It helps it tremendously. I mean, I realize all the poo that I've been doing for years. I got to get out of there. I got to wipe the okole and move ahead. I'm sorry, that's terrible. But it's true. It's really true. And so when I go to perform, I perform with more joy these days than I have in the past. I find more joy in what I do. Number one, I don't do it as a profession anymore. I play for fun. If somebody calls me to do something, I'm like, yay! Oh yeah, well, sure. I'm an amateur.
No, that's not true.
Well, but I'm just saying that's how I view it.
Okay.
And so I find more joy. And the thing about students that I think is very interesting is that they are curious. And as you get older as a performer, sometimes you lose your own curiosity. And we all notice that as we go on, we're less curious. So that keeps my curiosity going about certain things, certain markings in the music, certain styles of playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curiosity, exploration, that's what it's about.
So another big part I've noticed in your teaching, or at least in the bass world, there's sort of this reputation that Indiana churns out a lot of job winners, especially for bass. I mean, obviously you and now Mr. Jeff Turner have done an incredible job with the studio, but is there any like sort of hints and any secret sauce that you give that, like, you know, what how have you taught your students like audition preparations and coachings or whatever?
You want me to give you my secrets? No,
exactly.
There is a secret sauce, and that is the student.
Okay.
It's 99% attitude, and it's 99% about the students that you get. If you, you know, speaking with all the greatest teachers, they always talk about it. You know, if you get a student that you have to work diligently at this level, you know, this age, with technique, like, okay, I got to work with technique. Students get frustrated because it has nothing to do with performance, really. I mean, it's just technique. You got to do it. But if you can get students that are really well set up, basically all the students that go to Curtis, you know, really Hal gets the cream of the crop. And Rice, you know, and the attitude of the students is, number one, confidence. They are confident people. They know what they want. You know, they work hard. They don't spend a lot of time questioning everything the teacher does. They're very focused on the goal, I guess. And that's the secret, is if you want to be a good teacher, have good students. Seriously. You can be the best teacher in the world, and if you don't have great students, it's a lot harder. I mean, that's really how it is.
But it seems like in Indiana, you've transformed a lot of people that had like raw talent per se, or like, you know, maybe they, you know, like you've turned them from good players to great players, right? Isn't there like some merit to the work that I guess not only the student has put from the practicing per se, but just sort of your teaching, right? Your teaching has had that kind of merit on or impact on every student that has come across Indiana.
Well, you know, it's a couple of things. Number one, you have to be well trained. I think you have to know what's good and what's not, number one, as a teacher. It's about the details. It's about sound. It's about communication. Really, number one thing is communication. If you can have a completely different idea than the person you're playing for. Yeah. And if you are sure about how you feel about the music, you will convince them. They may not agree with you, but you will convince them. And getting from point A to point B, it's all about that. Communication, it's how we speak. It's about how we communicate. If I was to speak to you like this and just ramble on and on without any pauses or commas or periods or anything else, it's just going to be a mess. It's about the commas, the periods, the inflection, right?
Absolutely.
And it's the same with music. If I put the syllable in the wrong place, it sounds wrong. Yeah. It's that simple. It's that simple. So, you know, that note doesn't have the right shape to it. This note doesn't have any direction to the next note. That note's out of tune. Where's the sound? And of course, how to hold the bow, how to draw the bow. All of that stuff.
What is your advice to bass players or students who want to improve technically? Like, is there a routine you recommend, some sort of drill, or is there some sort of approach that you have? Like, year one, you do this, year two, you get to this, and you just exponential, or?
Sure. Step one is the ear. I mean, it depends on where you are, of course. I mean, if you're talking real basics, open strings, get a good sound. Number one is So if you practice diving into, hard pieces, I'm challenging myself. I'm playing hard pieces all the time. That is not necessarily going to get you to the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's about starting with open strings every day.
Mm-hmm.
Finding goods, being willing to spend 6 months on open strings. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's about the long process.
Mm-hmm.
Working bowing patterns, all of that stuff. And it's also important to develop a good ear. What is a good sound? What is a sound that's going to be inviting, an intimate sound? Mm-hmm. Listening to vocalists, listening to singers. If you can tell which singers you like and which singers you don't like on American Idol, it means you have an ear, right?
So would you say, like, in some ways, the technical aspect of bass development is like being able to sort of recognize things outside of your instrument as well? Like maybe just like for me, like I feel like a lot of my progress has been developed because of watching great cello players, great
Sure.
violin players. Do you think that helps a lot in bass playing, or?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. I think that it can be deceptive because if we copy,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to end up being a copy. Okay. It's developing your own sense of what you like and what you don't like.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily about copying. So if I copy details,
Mm-hmm.
bad.
Mm-hmm.
If I copy big picture, great.
Okay.
So style, sound, excellent. But not the details. The details, the nuances, that's individual.
Okay.
You and I speak the same language, but we don't speak exactly in the same way. So
Yeah,
general
definitely.
overview is the same,
Mm-hmm.
but the details are different. The timing.
Is there any like etude or scale books though you would recommend to any bass players who are trying to develop?
Depends on the level, of course. Samandal's great. I know. Yeah, I started on Samandal. There's a reason why. Okay. As you move up the line, there are other books. I like some of the bowing books. I love Kreutzer.
Mm-hmm.
Kreutzer for the double bass, invaluable.
Okay.
Exercise number 10, etude number 10 from the Nanni Fiorello Kreutzer book is great.
Okay.
I think that's a staple. Kreutzer number 1 at the frog, and at the tip, it's about practicing what you're not good at, not about playing what you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. A few other books that I really like, Petracchi, Extended Higher Technique for learning thumb position.
Mm-hmm.
I love some of the bowing books. The Bogen Technique book by Klaus Trumpf is great. I think that's a fantastic book. My teacher Homer Mensch gave me that.
Mm-hmm.
Kamini, tons of etude books. Tom Martin has an etude book out that has a bunch of these simple, straightforward etudes.
Mm-hmm.
As bass players, we play more arpeggios than we play scales. So practicing arpeggiated etudes is very important. Making sure that it sounds chordal.
What's your advice for people who are trying to improve intonation?
Do it in as many ways as possible. So there are tuners.
Mm-hmm.
You can use a tuner. That's where you're looking at the needle moving. Not ideal because you're not using your ears, you're using your eyes.
Okay.
You want to be able to use your ears, so drones are fine. But making sure you're not using the same drone every single time. I like this thing called the Korg OT120. It's a tuner that you buy, and you buy a little microphone input. It has a clip-on mic, and it has a playback function. You turn it around, and the speaker's facing you, and you play a note, and it plays back exactly the same pitch as you're playing. I think there are some phone apps that do the same thing where you can use headphones.
Okay.
It plays the same pitch, but in tune, and you match that pitch.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Oh,
technology.
Well, it's better than a drone for numerous reasons. Drones are great, but as you are further away from the pitch of the drone, think about it. You're going to play flatter and flatter the higher you go.
For sure.
right? That's the thing about intervals is they're slightly out of tune as you get
Yeah.
here, right?
Definitely.
A drone that can play back exactly the pitch you're playing, great. Okay,
So
that's the way to.
let's shift gears now to orchestral excerpts. I mean, bass players, that's like in some ways excerpts are like our etudes, right?
Yeah.
Or they're just these little things that we play so often, and it's just like things we're constantly learning. Like I can't even remember when's the last time I didn't have Beethoven 5 in like a rep class, right, in my
Right.
college years. But is there like an approach, in your opinion, to learning orchestral excerpt? Is it more than just the excerpt? Like, should bass players sort of get into like the whole piece, the score study, the history? Like, what do you think?
Yes. So the most important thing is you have to understand the history of of music in general. I mean, it's
Hmm.
very important. So if I go back a couple of hundred years, music sounds similar. You know, like Haydn, well, even Mozart, Salieri, Haydn will have very similar sounds
Hmm.
and similar. I guess the structure of the music's very similar. One with Dittersdorf and Van Hall, right? It kind of all sounds similar.
Yeah.
Sounds classical. So you can say there's a big overarching structure to that, which is style
Uh-huh.
and character, right? It's the style here, character underneath that.
Yeah.
As you get later and later, it's more about the individual. Beethoven, Romanticism, the idea that the individual is king.
Hmm.
Individuality in composition. So if you come to the modern day, all these different compositions sound different. Everyone's
Yeah.
trying to be an individual. So you have to learn style. Everyone has a different style of writing. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, where do I
Absolutely.
start? So you want to start earlier with Haydn. I start with
Hmm.
Haydn, and I like to do a bunch of Haydn. So playing along with recordings, a bunch of Haydn symphonies,
Hmm.
and then go to Mozart and play a bunch of Mozart. So 6 months of Haydn, if I could say ideally, then 6 months of Mozart. Okay, then you get a sense of the basis of all the music that comes after it.
The basis of all music.
And when you go earlier, it's more individual.
Hmm.
When you think about when you go to Bieber, or
Yeah.
Monteverdi, there's very individual. Vivaldi, you hear a little more individuality there,
Hmm.
right? So there are these waves of individuality and style, individuality, style. So start with Haydn and Mozart, and then go from there.
I see.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
learn
interesting.
style. That's basically it. Um, if you start by doing Heldenleben, you're stuck in Heldenleben land. Okay, it's too heavy. There's too much going on.
For sure.
Simple first, and when you think about where classical music originated, it's Italy.
Mhm.
So study Italian, the Italian language, how clear it is. Io compro dei bambini verdi. I buy green babies. That's all that I know. That's what I learned at Juilliard in the Italian. It's like, why don't you say this phrase? I'm making something up for you. And then when you go to German, Gotterdammerung, Kindertotenlieder, it's a lot more complicated and dark. Look at the artwork. Italian art is very clear,
Mhm.
right? Adam and God, the fresco, the fingers, perfectly clear. That's Italian tension. That's Italian. The idea that the fingers are not touching, but they're slightly apart. That's Italian. The tension in Italian food and language and art. It's
For
all
sure.
clear.
Mhm.
When it comes to German art, dark, brooding, right? It's not as clear.
Yeah.
When you go to Italy,
Absolutely.
try the food. That's what we don't have enough of that in school,
Mhm.
where you have art, language, music, all wrapped up into one thing under history.
Mhm.
And imagine if we learned that way. My gosh, we'd experience history. That's really the key to it all.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to portray just through one medium. Hard. Hard to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, so you bring up the topic of confidence earlier when it comes to a student or like any bass player for that matter, auditioning or competitions or whatever. So, you if you're a student and you're a bass player, you do all this work, like you said, know the history, know the style, practice your butt off, and just know everything. But then, like, you get to an audition and you kind of just throw the towel, right? Would you say like bass playing in those kind of scenarios 50% is really just mental preparation, like
90%.
just 90%? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
do you have an approach for calming nerves or like just focusing on the audition, don't let the other auditionees get in your head kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, if you're at an audition, that means that you've worked hard and you've gotten to that point, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, it's all mental.
Okay.
And you have to understand that it's not a singular thing in audition. It's auditions. So to build confidence, it comes through doing it over and over again. Whatever I'm afraid of doing is what I need to confront and what I need to do. So if I'm afraid of performing, I have to, it's great to start young, performing, getting up individually. Bass players aren't as willing to do that. Playing solos in front of people.
Yeah.
So put yourself in situations that will not be comfortable. And coming from Hawaii, I know for myself, I was very insecure. Didn't want to offend anyone. You know what I mean? We're kind of like, we want to be nice to everyone, show the aloha spirit. And you can keep that as that's who you are as somebody from Hawaii. That's wonderful to keep, but don't let the fear get in your way. So making sure that you put yourself in uncomfortable situations. I started in Maui, going and speaking. My mom had me when I was 5 years old, going on the radio. She was a rock and roll radio disc jockey. So
Awesome.
doing that kind of thing, going to the county council and speaking when you're young, going into public places and learning public speaking, very important. Taking debate class in high school, great to do. Why not? It's all relevant.
Yeah.
Read
Definitely.
poetry. Poetry reading. Oh, talk about pressure. That's a lot of pressure.
Wow. I guess it's more simple than maybe the average musician sort of thinks about.
It's simple. It is. It's simple, and if as human beings, we try to make everything complicated. It's not complicated. It's very simple. Keep it simple. Keep it beautiful. Get rid of the fear. Play for 3-year-olds. Make them smile.
So in some ways, like, would you say that like even like doing more community outreach, obviously it's impactful in the community. That means even that kind of stuff really bolsters one's confidence in their own playing. Is that what you
Sure.
would you agree?
Yes, I mean, you have to translate it into your playing.
Yeah.
You have to have something that you want to share. So if you are speaking about something you're passionate about, play passionately. It's the same thing, but you have to go to that same place. Take acting classes. When you are in the audition, it's also very important to look people in the eye. Don't be afraid of looking people in the eye. When you're in the warm-up room, ignore everyone else. Who cares what they're doing? It's irrelevant. There is no external competition. It's only about you and what you have to say. And so closing your eyes, getting into slow, deep breathing, paying attention to your heartbeat. I love some, I use an Aikido technique that I learned years ago, which is pulse breathing. So you feel your heartbeat, you breathe out with the pulse. You go. That slows the heartbeat down. So those types of breathing exercises, wonderful to do.
So let's now shift gears to your story. You mentioned earlier, Lance Joe being an inspiration. Obviously, I know you're from Hawaii, and you're from Maui, so we have that kind of connection. Let's just dive into that. Take us through your journey. I mean, I think you didn't start on bass originally, right? Like there was other instruments and there were other things that you did.
Yeah, I started with Suzuki violin. with Melba Henderson, who's I believe she passed away quite a few years ago. She was in Kihei, and she brought violin students to my school, Lihikai Elementary School in Maui. Maui's the best island, by the way. Oh, I didn't say that. And so as soon as I saw these kids playing on stage, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. From that day on, I was like, that's what I want to do.
So this is like your elementary days, or?
Yeah, 6 years old.
Nice.
I started a little later, but still young enough. And then after, and Melba Henderson left to go to Portland, Oregon, and then I started studying with Joan Hayden for a few years. And then right after that, I switched to bass. And when I was 13, it was a real challenge, and I wasn't nervous playing the bass. I was kind of nervous playing the fiddle, but not the bass. Kind of because it's this big lumbering thing that as long as you can play something like kind of in tune.
It looks cool, right?
Yeah. It's like, okay, I can play this note, less notes, and then went to the Youth Symphony, Hawaii Youth Symphony. It used to be a Honolulu Youth Symphony. They used to fly us in every other week from Maui. And then from there straight to Juilliard. That was it.
Didn't you play like tuba or something at one point too, or no?
Marching band.
So you had a lot of just music in your life growing up, right? And then, so when you got to Juilliard, I mean, like, who were your inspirations? Like, how did that even happen? How did you go from Maui to Juilliard, right? That's just like, in some ways, opposite worlds.
Well, that was an interesting thing. I met my teacher the summer before, well, it was actually the summer in the same year that I got in. This was after auditions had happened for Juilliard. I was going to go to the University of Hawaii. And so I met my teacher at the International Society of Bassists Conference, which I recommend all bass players go to. And so I met him, and he said, come on over to my house. The ISB was in New York City in 1990. And my teacher was just maybe a couple of blocks away. So went to my teacher's house, soon-to-be teacher's house, and he had me playing on his beautiful old Italian bass. This is like, a couple hundred years old. I was like, whoa. And he said, well, I don't think you're going to get into Juilliard. I think maybe if you go to one of the other schools in New York, but study with me. He gave me some music and said, why don't you take this? It was Eccles Sonata or something. It wasn't Eccles, it was something else. And he gave me something easy, a Marcello Sonata. and sent me home, practiced for a month, come back. And so I went back to Maui, practiced my butt off, and got back, and there was an opening at Juilliard. He called me up, he said, there's an opening. Somebody dropped out, we need one more bass player. The Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, was on tour at the time. So guess who was in my audition? My teacher. He was the only bass teacher that was left in New York at the school. So I squeezed in. I got lucky. And that's how I started. And then I played for him in June. I got in August. So that was it. I moved all my stuff to New York, moved everything to New York. I was like, if I don't get in, I'm just going to stay in New York and take private lessons. That's it.
Awesome.
No fear. No fear.
Well, I mean, how was your experience in New York? Like going from Maui to New York, I mean, that's also a change, right? That's not just like pack your bags and go. Like, that's a huge life adjustment, right?
I never want to go through that again. Back then there was a lot of crime. I mean, everyone got mugged right at Lincoln Center. I mean, it was terrible. Lots of muggings, street gangs. Would 5-year-old kids in a gang would come and mug people. It was scary. Oh my goodness. But it was scary. I stayed inside for a month. When I first got there, I was scared. Of New York. And then starting off, I didn't know anything. I was not prepared. I was floundering for a year. I worked my butt off, but I didn't know what I was doing for a year. Very difficult. But if I didn't have that experience, I don't know if I'd be where I am. I had to improved my playing so much in 1 year. I don't know how I did it. So.
Well, it's obviously paid off because I mean, you ended up playing a lot of chamber music. I mean, you played at Marlboro. You've played at what? Was it like Tokyo Jupiter Chamber Players at one point or something?
Jupiter Chamber Players, right?
Yeah.
It's in New York. Yeah.
Oh, New York. Sorry, yeah. But you had a lot of performance of it. But I feel like as a bass, your route as a bassist wasn't necessarily like conservatory, orchestra auditions, get into an orchestra, and then go into professorship. It was sort of just like, go to school, and then you had all these wonderful experiences as a chamber bassist, which is rare, right?
Well, it's important to know what you love, and to not let anyone dissuade you from doing what you love. So people were telling me left and right, you can't make it work. You're never going to make it. You're not going to earn a living. I had people constantly telling, including the dean of Juilliard. I quit Juilliard because the dean of Juilliard said you're never going to make it.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And I said, no, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And so as long as you go for it, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Okay, for sure.
If you don't go for it, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? See what I'm saying? Life is too short just to sit down and be passive about it. So do what you love. I would not want to be doing something that I do not love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I've done everything I've wanted to do. So
I think there's an aspect to sort of our profession in general, though, that relates to other fields for sure. But it's just like we get a lot of fulfillment performing. I'm sure you've played so many concerts, and maybe every time you've played Trout Quintet for like 100 times, it's been different. But I think there's another aspect where it's the relationships you build in music, right? Not necessarily just all the personal fulfillment you get from playing notes and performing concerts, but at least for me, music has been a thing where I've found like another family, another group of friends. I mean, how has that been for you all these years in all your experience?
Perfectly
Is there would you say like there's a lot of relationships that are so close to you now that's like a family, and then like anytime you guys can play, like it actually enhances the performance in some ways when you're playing with people that you're more connected with? Like, does that have a play in your playing, I guess?
So in music and in family life, there are the ups and downs. It's exactly the same. It's like a slightly dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
When it's really good. So it's like brothers and sisters squabbling and having fun. So the best groups I've played in, they haven't been nice to me. they why are you doing that? What's going on there? That sounds terrible. So those are my favorite performances when the musicians are feisty and it's like brother and sister type thing. Yeah. So it's I almost got to go back to Maui and play with some of my favorite people again. So people that do not let you get away with anything are the best.
What has been your most memorable performance in all these years?
God, that's a tough one. I would say on stage in Carnegie, at Alexander Schneider's memorial concert. He was and he was one of the head people at Marlboro, among other things that he did, Budapest Quartet and all that. So I got to play Brandenburg 3 with the Juilliard, Guarneri, and Tokyo quartets combined, and I was the bass player.
Wow.
So that would be probably one of the highlights on stage.
That's like the dream team, Team USA kind of chamber group, right?
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. So that and then the other things were, I would say, also doing some of the movie stuff. Getting to nod at some of the directors and getting to talk to them a little bit. That's kind of been fun. The movie commercial work.
What are some movies that you've been a part of?
Oh gosh, so some Robert De Niro stuff, The Score, things like that. Moonrise Kingdom was interesting. Wes Anderson was there, and it was interesting to work with them. Unemotional, just staring at the screen. I don't like this. That's good. It's like matter of fact. Um, so things like that. Howard Shore movies were good. You know, some of the. I think he did Lord of the Rings. I didn't do that one, but he's the same
Uh-huh.
guy that did the music. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Lots of cool stuff then.
fun things. Peter Gabriel, Sting, things like that. Fun.
Hmm.
Getting to meet people and realizing everyone's human. That's the greatest thing.
I and I guess let's wrap up with just sort of like for when it comes to bass playing, to shift gears again, what would you recommend or how would you recommend bass players choosing solo repertoire? You mentioned earlier about, you know, playing harder things isn't necessarily what's best for you. But then as a bassist, we already have limited rep, right? I mean, in undergrad, how many times do we play Bottesini or
Right.
Kusevitsky, right? So do you have like a method in choosing repertoire or?
Yes. Number one, choose something that you want to play. It can be of any level. I mean, just start something that's too hard. It's okay.
Mhm.
But yeah, I want to play this. I want to learn this. Um, Number two, play something you have to play. So it could be something like, oh yeah, this is part of the standard reps. It could be one of the four major concertos or excerpts,
Okay.
right? And then the third part is play something simple. So the stuff that we usually want to play when we're younger is harder than we can handle.
Mhm.
So that'll push to the next level, of course. But the simple stuff,
Mhm.
if I need to always play simple music, and that's one of the crucial elements, because if I play something simple, I start learning what it really means to be a musician. The simple
Mhm.
stuff is the hardest musically. It's not
Is there
about
any?
technique.
Do you have any favorite pieces that you like, or out of the four major concertos, or any sonata transcriptions like Bach? Which ones do you like for
Sure.
bass?
I mean, look, I love Pergolesi Nina.
Hmm.
You know, it's one of the most beautiful, simple pieces. I like Nardini Sonata. If you look up Piatigorsky and you look
Hmm.
up Nardini, there's a recording of him playing that. It's beautiful.
Hmm.
I love the Chopin cello sonata, second slow movement on the bass. I think that's beautiful. Ravel Habanero works very well on the bass.
Really?
I also like hard stuff too. Yeah. I mean, oh yeah, I love hard things. So Mozart 35, I love the that kind of stuff. That's
Yeah,
all fun.
for sure.
Yeah.
Or last two pages of Beethoven 9 kind of thing.
Eccles Sonata. All of the auditions that I did, like the ones that I really like, the auditions I really cared about, Marlborough, Saito Kinen Orchestra in Japan, things that I love this, I want to play in this group, was for me Eccles. Everyone else played concertos. I played Eccles' first movement. That's it.
So do you start on the G string or do you use the harmonic?
I started both. I do differently each time. Never play the
Depending.
same thing. Never play the same thing the same way twice. Is the general rule.
Well, I guess this is a good time to sort of just wrap things up. I
Cool.
mean, do you have any? I guess the last question I'll leave with you is, are you satisfied and happy with how your career has turned out? I mean,
Sure.
is there any big future goals in the next few years, or this is sort of where you're
Yeah.
comfortable and?
No, I mean I'm still playing, so I'm playing with my favorite musicians in the next couple of years.
Mhm.
All of my favorite, Vadim Gluzman next year, Ida Kavafian, Peter Wiley, all of my favorite chamber musicians and soloists,
Mhm.
most of them, and then doing a concerto coming up in
Awesome.
California, Reading Symphony. I'm doing Bottesini concerto.
Oh,
That'd be fun. Yeah, I'm so satisfied. I've done absolutely everything I've wanted to do. There's
how
nothing, there's nothing that I want to do. That's everything else is frosting. So,
this may be a sort of, I guess, weird question to ask, but like, how would you want your legacy to go down once you
oh, I
finish your
don't
career?
care. I don't care. Legacy doesn't matter to me. I just, If anything, if I can help a student and if they love what they do, if they are successful, I'm happy. It's not about me. Once you are a professional, it's not about you anymore. It's about your audience. It's about the next generation. Who cares? But the further we are away from the music we play in time, Bittersdorf. The further we are away from that time period, the harder it is to interpret. And there's going to be a point in time when there is no more Bach, when there is no more Mozart, that it will come to an end. There is going to be a day when that happens. And I try to remind myself that our job is to keep it alive for as long as possible. It's like running with an egg on a spoon and trying not to drop it. I just don't want to drop that egg. As long as I do that, I'm happy.
I guess the last question is, people like you and me from Hawaii, going out to the mainland, whatever, I feel like we are a small portion of the talent that exists in Hawaii. Like there is a lot, I'm sure you've seen more so than I have, that there is a lot of talent that comes from Hawaii. But, what is your advice to people in Hawaii who are afraid of going for the music school, or who is afraid of who can't see themselves having a career in music? Like what are your words of encouragement to people in Hawaii? That's for someone who's made it himself.
Well, it's basically, how much love do you have for what you do? Do you love it so much that it'll get rid of the fear? So if that's something that you really like and love doing, bolster those emotions and get rid of the fear. And it's about being very unemotional about your future. So you have to then say, okay, I love this. Get a sheet of paper, split it down the middle. All of the things that you are doing and that you want to do moving forward. Think of the positives and the negatives. Whatever's at the top of your list, that's what you love the most, and that's what you should pursue, I think. And then what you do is you say to yourself, okay, nothing's going to get in my way. I don't have to be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's not going to hurt you. If you love it, trust that feeling. Trust your gut. And then take the steps to move forward. And every time you're afraid, I'm afraid to audition for Juilliard, say, no, take a step back. Now, why am I afraid? There's no reason to be afraid.
Yeah.
And make the decision. Be decisive. It's better to be decisive and to make the wrong decision than to be indecisive.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the key. And when you're playing a phrase, this is where I want to go in the phrase. This is how I want to say it. Better to do that than to be afraid of it. So make errors. Fail forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Muroki. For those of you listening and viewing this video, we hope you like and subscribe Broadcast Hawaii. And again, we've had artists like Robert McDuffie and Siao He, and now Mr. Kurt Muroki, and we intend to have more artists moving forward. So we hope you stay in touch with us. Any last words, Kurt?
Aloha! Tani klikini.
All right. Thank you so much, Kurt.